A lot of Summit is learning how to respond to things and defend your position without being aggressive or coming off as ignorant or
a hothead.
Yes, a hothead. There's the word. Yeah, that was a majority of what Summit was about, and they tested us on that, and I think halfway through the first week, I think it was, and clearly it was not. We hadn't learned much, so.
All right, welcome everyone to podcast 51 of Renew Your Mind. In this series of podcasts, we're talking to Jake Fousek, who attended the Summit Ministries Student Conferences. And the last podcast, well, actually, we also have with us Jake. We have Pastor Jordan Chambers, our family and youth pastor. We have Senior Pastor Paul Grunberg and Dana Hall, myself as the moderator. As you can see, I was really excited to jump right in. So here we go. So Jake and Pastor Jordan brought us up to kind of the mechanics of before Jake arrived. And now we're really interested, Jake, in hearing about, what was it like when you got there? What was your daily routine, maybe let's say Monday through Friday? And I'll just let you take it from here.
Well, when we got there, it was a really welcoming atmosphere, and they got us all set up. One of the things was I went with Danielle, but they have a strategy where they intentionally separate you from your people who you come with. Jordan knows a lot, like a lot more in depth of how that works. But
Sure.
For example, if I went with a few of the guys, they would intentionally separate us to make more friendships. And at first, I was a little apprehensive about how that was going to go. But I honestly am very, very glad that that's how things were, because I was able to meet a lot more people and create friendships that I still have to this day with some people that I met there. So I'm very grateful for what they did with that. But so we got assigned our rooms, and I roomed with, I think, 5 people, including myself. We had bunk beds, classic camp style setup. But we would wake up around, I think it was 6 or 7. It was very early in the morning. But we would have breakfast, and then we would jump right into classes. We would have class for about 2 to 3 hours. It would be usually 1 to 3 hours. It just depended on the day in the class. But we would do that, and then we would right after our first class, we would, I think, go to lunch, if I remember right, and then right after lunch we'd jump right back into it and have a class or two. We'd have breaks. I think we would have after breakfast we'd have 2 classes, and then we would have lunch, and then after lunch we'd have 2 more classes along that lines. I'm not quite sure exactly. It's been a while, but
that's all right.
I think we'd have around that schedule, and then at night we'd have a slight small groups where we would meet with some other people that were at the camp with a small group leader, and we would just talk about the classes we had throughout the day and discuss our feelings on them, and then personal stuff we'd go through, and we created a bond in that small group, and it was a pretty good extra touch that they had during the camp.
So with the classes that you had, if you think in terms of what school is like, at 8 o'clock you'd have math, at 9 o'clock you'd have social studies or whatever. Were the classes set up that way so that every morning the first class would be on a particular topic that would carry throughout the first week or the time you were there, or did it just vary from class to class? Would it be the same instructor or speaker? Did those change on just based on the hours, or did it change throughout the week?
Well, we had different speakers throughout the day, actually, and they would do a series. It was it wouldn't be the same instructor throughout the day. They would have like their set class period, and then like a few days later they continue that class, and they would have multiple instructors throughout the day, and they would teach different their different subjects per se throughout the day, and it was multiple subjects throughout the day, and they would change their curriculum throughout the week. So it was a pretty good setup. So we had a variety of things to learn about and things to take in that they would teach, and so
Did they kind of gear you toward understanding what a worldview is and what your current worldview was at the beginning of the?
They definitely came at us hard. They wanted us to question our beliefs now, and they wanted us to make sure that we either stuck with our beliefs or to look deeper in within ourselves and to see if we would want to change our worldview or adjust it. And they came at us with some pretty cold hard facts, and a lot of people. They actually had one of the classes. They had one man come in, and he really came at us, and it actually made the class very, very angry. And kids started. Majority of the class were some of them were 16, 17. They got really upset, and it was a pretty bad scene. And they actually had someone come in after him and say they intentionally did that to make us look at how we react to things we don't like to hear and how we want to better ourselves. And that was one of the biggest moments. I honestly don't even remember what he was very controversial about. But what was important and what they wanted us to remember is that we can't react with anger, and we can't react with our impulses. We need to think about what people say and take time to take it in and absorb it and think about it, instead of reacting off of our impulses. And that was a very big learning experience off of that.
Did most of the young adults in that class just use their emotions and get angry?
Oh yeah, yep.
Would you say that every one of you did, or
there were a lot of them, like myself. We just kind of sat back and kind of watched what was going on, enjoyed the show. But yeah, there was the people that stood back, like myself. I kind of just was watching what was going on. It was shocking seeing the reaction people were getting and what he was saying. It was shocking. Like we didn't expect him to be, so aggressive towards us and so outlandishly speaking and outlandish. But a lot of the kids were yelling back. There was, expletives thrown. It was a crazy scene. People walked out. There were a few kids that actually walked out of the classroom. But it was a crazy scene. But that was one of the biggest learning points that I had, was to make sure that we need to watch how we react to things instead of impulsively responding.
And then how did they go from there on out? Did they show you tools on how to curb your emotional reactions? Or and is that mostly what the young adults did not have? Were the tools to without emotion explain what they want to say? Okay.
Well, a lot of Summit is learning how to respond to things and defend your position without being aggressive or coming off as ignorant or
a hothead.
Yes, a hothead. There's the word. That was a majority of what Summit was about, and they tested us on that. And I think halfway through the first week, I think it was, and clearly it was not. We hadn't learned much, so we definitely had a lot more towards the end of the week. And the second week was a lot of how to defend our faith, and especially one of the biggest ones I took from was the abortion debates that are going on in our society. And that's one of the major things that I took from Summit is my stance on abortion. I didn't really care about abortion. I mean, I didn't really think much of it. I didn't think it was a big deal. I didn't know much. I was 18, fresh out of high school. I didn't really care about really the issues. It's unfortunately become a political issue, and politics wasn't really anything I listened to, but they brought it to my attention at Summit how important the issue of abortion is. And that's one of the greatest things about Summit, is they made you think about things that you really didn't think about beforehand. So that's one of the things I'm really grateful for.
So Jake, on the tools that you learned to use, what was the most important thing you learned about that class you're talking about, how they really jacked up the emotions and caused people to fight back? What's the biggest tool that you learned, and what do you think would be the most important thing that you could share with others that they need to do when defending their faith or defending a particular worldview, Christian worldview?
Well, one of the things they taught us is people are going to come off as insensitive. People are going to not understand, especially people that are non-Christians. They aren't going to understand what our faith is, and they're going to say things that for some people would be offensive to them, like God isn't real, or abortion doesn't matter, those kind of things, or how does abortion relate to Christianity. There's a lot of things like that would come up, and they explain to us that we need to understand that they don't understand our religion or whatever it is, whatever the topic is, perspective.
Yeah.
And so we need to be understanding of that and try to help them understand instead of telling them. We need to ask them questions and make them think about what they're saying instead of just saying it, if that makes sense. I think that was a big part of Summit.
So you'd almost have to become a detective,
basically,
to query where they're at, so that you could then maybe present some other questions that would get them to think beyond where they were at the moment.
Yep, definitely. Thinking outside the box is one of the words they like to use a lot, which is a very common phrase, but they used it in a way that made us really think outside of the box is what they were trying to get us to do, and think about what our beliefs are and be stable in them. Because the biggest thing I've noticed is when you don't know what your true beliefs are, it's very hard to stay consistent with them.
Yeah.
Right.
You mentioned detective. As a segue, there's a lot of really professional people that are putting this on. And the people that are speaking in these seminars are very high-level intellectuals, very professional people that they're not just, some random pastor from 3 towns over, or some, the cousin of the guy who runs the place. You mentioned detective. There's one that specifically he tends to talk about the reliability of the Gospels and the scriptures in general. His name is Warner Wallace. He was a cold case detective for like 20 some years, and he was frequently used on 60 Minutes. He's like world renowned and was one of the largest names in California when it came to cold case detectives. And he used detective techniques in approaching the Bible, and specifically cold cases. He's like, because he was an atheist at that point. He said, well, of course, I can use these techniques to see how, false these testimonies are, because that's what I do every day in my job. And when he applied those techniques, then he found and discovered the truth and the consistency of Scripture. And so you get that. There's guys like him. There's guys like Dr. Sean McDowell. He and his father, Josh McDowell, are the capstone names of apologetics in America,
especially for InterVarsity Press.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Big names. Huge. In Biola University. They're massive in a lot of that. There's a gentleman named Christopher Wan, who he had such an amazing life story. Came out of drugs, was in prison, lived as a homosexual, and came out of it, and talks about the lifestyle of homosexuality. And he has a catchphrase: God doesn't call us to heterosexuality, but to holiness. It's not about what kind of sexuality you have. It's about doing what's right. And the perspectives they get is it's beyond your typical conversation value. And Dr. John Stonestreet is another big name that's out there. Massive authors and theologians. And these are people that not only do they teach these classes, but one of my favorite things about how that works, and I don't know if you took advantage of this, Jake, or not, but I'd love to hear if you did, is that those speakers made themselves available daily for just regular conversations. They would sit on the porch chairs and ask students to come ask them questions. They'd go to the lunchrooms and eat lunch with the students and talk to them about what they heard. And that interaction from the speakers to the students, I know for Rebecca back in the day when she went, it was huge for her. Sure. Because it was personal all of a sudden. I don't know. Did you take advantage of any of that, or did you see any of that happening?
I did. They had those porch talks pretty much daily. Yeah, with the speakers, the main speakers of the day. Some of the bigger speakers they've had, they would sit on the porch and talk, and I sat in for a few of them. But one of the biggest, Jeff Meyer's
he kind of puts the whole thing on. Yeah, he's the man behind Summit Ministries.
He's an author, and he writes books. And I read one of his books, The Secret Battle of Ideas About God, and that was one of the best books I've ever read. It has incredible perspectives and how to defend your ideas of God and how to defend your faith. And I got to talk to him personally one-on-one. I actually went up to him towards the end of the week. I wanted to catch him, and I got him to sign my book, and I talked to him a little bit, and he's incredible. He's a great guy, and he has a lot of great ideas, and he was also a speaker there.
Yeah.
And he was phenomenal. So.
Well, that's good. Any other speakers that come to mind?
Mike Adams.
Mike Adams.
He was really good. He was the funny one. he was the guy. He got the class laughing a lot, but he was fantastic. He had a bunch of stories that were really funny, but relayed perfectly back to what he was trying to teach us, and he was a phenomenal teacher.
I know that when we were looking at the current Summit Ministries lineup of speakers, Jason Jimenez is going to be our Spiritual Emphasis Weekend speaker in October. Mm-hmm. And so he's out there doing this with the young adults, and he'll be here at our church in October to present, and would be a wonderful time for people to come out and to learn and listen and talk and ask questions, those kinds of things. So it's a wonderful opportunity.
Okay, well, I think we'll end it right there.
Can we just ask one question?
Oh, absolutely.
So if there was one thing that you think Christians as a whole need to do better in regard to having conversations with either nominal Christians or atheists, what would that be?
I feel like the fear of being judged is one of the biggest things. I feel like as Christians, we shouldn't be afraid to defend our faith, which is something I definitely struggled with when I was in high school and even right before Summit, pretty much. I mean, up until then, I really struggled with talking about God because I felt like it was, not weird, but like I wouldn't be cool, or I'd be judged for it at school and lose friends over it, or whatever the case may be. I feel like if we are true Christians, we should be proud to be Christians, and we should be able to talk about our faith openly and unapologetically, in my opinion. And I think that our opinions and our beliefs and our stances, I think can be unpopular, but that doesn't mean they're wrong, or I feel like we should all be unapologetically open with our beliefs and be able to talk about them openly, and especially with people that don't believe, because God wants us to spread the word and wants us to talk about God openly and freely. And I feel like that's something a lot of us struggle with today, is like, oh, I don't want to talk to my brother about it because he doesn't believe. I don't want to offend him because he doesn't believe, or he doesn't think this is right in the Bible and I know it is, or I believe it is. I think that's a big problem in our, not as just Christians, but as a society. We need to be able to talk about what we believe in and be strong about it and unapologetic about it.
Yeah, I like how you put that. Thanks, Jake. Okay, well, we'll end that one, that podcast right there, and then we've got a couple more where we can ask more questions in depth. We are at the First United Methodist Church, and we'd love if you joined us. We have a 9 a.m. Traditional service and a 10:45 contemporary. You can visit us in person, or you can watch us via Facebook or YouTube. If you have any questions at all, please call us at 989-732-5380, and feel free to go through our website for all the events that we have going on. So until our next podcast, thanks.